number of us, including some people I see here, tried to organize national tax resistance, which was a middling success, didn't get very far. The war itself had already been going on for years. I mean, there was so little protest that people don't even remember when it started as an actual war, not just repression and subversion and so on. That was 1962, when John F. Kennedy sent the U.S. Air Force to start bombing South Vietnam, initiated chemical warfare programs to destroy crops with livestock, ground cover, began programs to drive ultimately millions of people into what amounted to concentration camps, where they were surrounded by barbed wire was put to protect them from the guerrillas, indigenous guerrillas who conceded they were willingly supported. That's a major war. And by 1965, the war had in fact expanded. It was starting to bomb Vietnam. But even then, the protest was very limited. I just don't recommend this, but for my sins, I just read Arthur Schlesinger's journals, which recently appeared. If you look through them, during the years when he was really part of the government, in fact, he was the left-wing conscience of the government during the Kennedy years, there's page after page about the wonderful parties he went to, and Ethel was pushed into the swimming pool, and how beautiful Jackie was, and so on and so forth. There was literally not one word about Vietnam. The word doesn't appear. As if it wasn't happening. And that was the general attitude and consciousness. The first major public protest against the war was October 1965, first International Day of Protest. Some of you will probably remember it. We did have a demonstration at Boston Common, a rally at Boston Common, or rather intended to. It was just broken up violently by students, among others. We couldn't hear a word any of the speaker was saying. If you listened to the radio that day, at the Boston Globe the next day, it was full of bitter denunciations of people who dared to issue embarrassingly mild protests against the war. The protests then were mostly against the bombing of North Vietnam, which was bad enough, but a sideshow. The main attack was against South Vietnam, always was. Well, things have changed to some extent. In this morning's Boston Globe, you can read a milder criticism which says that we should do nothing to imperil the mission of our forces in Iraq. That's criticism at the far left. But things have changed a little. Around the time that this was formed, there was beginning to be some public criticism apart from grassroots activists. So Arthur Schlesinger again wrote what's probably the first, regarded as the first book critical of the war, heritage, in which he did oppose the war in Vietnam, but on interesting grounds, which will sound very familiar today. He was having a debate with his close friend Joseph Alsop, a super hawk. Alsop argued that if we send more troops, we can win. Translate the surge. Schlesinger argued that he said, we all pray that Mr. Alsop will be right. And if he is, and if we can win, we will be praising the wisdom and statesmanship of the American government in a land of ruin and wreck, as he described it. But it's unlikely that it will work. Not hard to translate that till today. Some things haven't changed much in the elite culture. That was these were the conservative, in 1967, there were some people who really cared, like Bernard Fall, leading military historian and Vietnam specialist, who was no dove, incidentally. He was killed in combat in 1967, attempting combat, and just before his death, he wrote his last reflections on a war, in which he said that he wondered whether Vietnam, and it's mainly South Vietnam, would survive as a cultural